The blacksmith's hammer came down on the anvil with a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat, and Quinlan Thorne knew exactly what he was making. A horseshoe that would last 3 winters, maybe 4 if the mare it fitted was treated right. The heat of the forge pressed against his face, familiar as breathing, and sweat ran down his bare arms despite the autumn chill creeping through the open doors of his smithy. He had built this place himself 5 years ago when he turned 18. Every stone laid with his own hands on the plot of land the village council had granted him after his apprenticeship. No family to give him land or tools or even a name worth carrying, but he had made something anyway. That was how Quinlan worked. Alone, steady, without complaint. The festival preparations had been underway for 3 days now, the entire village of Millhaven transforming from a collection of farms and workshops into something bright and festive. Garlands hung between the buildings, and the smell of baking bread drifted from every household. The harvest had been good this year, better than the last 2 combined, and everyone seemed determined to celebrate properly. Quinlan had contributed what was expected: iron brackets for the festival booths, hinges for the platform where the musicians would play, and a donation of coin to help fund the feast. What he had not planned to contribute was himself. "You are coming to the dance tonight." It was not a question. Marcus Fielding stood in the doorway of the smithy, arms crossed, his weathered farmer's face set in the expression he usually reserved for stubborn cattle. Quinlan set down his hammer and used the tongs to return the horseshoe to the forge. "I will make an appearance." Not good enough. "You did last year too, stood in the corner for an hour nursing 1 cup of ale, then disappeared." "I was there, Quinlan." Marcus stepped inside, his voice softening. He was one of the few people in Millhaven who remembered Quinlan's parents, had known them before the fever took them when Quinlan was barely 7. "You are 23 years old. You work yourself harder than any 2 men. One night. Dance, drink, talk to people. You have earned it." The truth was that Quinlan did not know how to do any of those things well, dancing least of all. The village had raised him after his parents died, different families taking him in for months at a time, feeding him and clothing him but never quite making him one of their own. He had learned to work to be useful to earn his keep. He had not learned the softer skills, the ones families taught their children around the hearth on long winter evenings, but Marcus meant well and Quinlan owed him, so he nodded. "I will dance." Marcus looked suspicious. "You will, once." "One dance. Then you cannot say I did not try." A grin split the older man's face. "That is all I ask." "Well, that and that you bathe first. You smell like charcoal and horse." Quinlan did bathe in the creek behind his smithy, the cold water raising goosebumps on his skin. He dressed in his one good shirt, the blue one that only came out for festivals and funerals, and combed his dark hair back from his face. When he looked at himself in the small, spotted mirror above his washbasin, he saw a man built for work. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, a face too serious for 23. Not ugly, perhaps, but not the sort women wrote songs about either. The festival square was already crowded when he arrived at dusk. Torches burned in a great circle around the wooden platform where the musicians were setting up, and long tables groaned under the weight of food and drink. Children ran between the adults' legs, shrieking with laughter. Quinlan found Marcus near the ale barrel and accepted a cup, positioning himself where he could watch without being too conspicuous. The music started as the last light faded from the sky. There were 5 musicians, a drummer, a flutist, 2 fiddlers, and a woman with a hand harp. Quinlan recognized most of them, villagers who played at every festival and wedding, but one of the fiddlers was new. Or not new exactly. Different. She was an orc, green-skinned, with small tusks that curved up from her lower jaw and pointed ears that rose from beneath her dark hair. She wore simple clothes, a brown skirt and white blouse, and she held her fiddle with the same careful attention Quinlan gave to hot iron. When she drew the bow across the strings for the first song, the sound was sweet and clear, cutting through the noise of the crowd. Quinlan had heard there was an orc working at the inn, helping with the harvest crews that came through. He had not paid much attention. Orcs were not common in Millhaven, but they were not unheard of either. Some worked as laborers, some as crafters. Most moved on after a season or two. People were polite enough, but there was always distance. The first dance was a simple reel, and couples flooded the space in front of the platform. Quinlan stayed where he was, watching the patterns of movement, the way people spun and stepped and somehow never collided. It looked like chaos, but he knew there must be order to it, rules he had never learned. Marcus appeared at his elbow. "Well, the music is good, Quinlan." He sighed and drained his cup. "Fine, but I warned you." The second dance was forming up, people finding partners, and Quinlan walked out into the torch-lit space with the grim determination of a man heading into battle. He was aware of people watching, of whispers and grins. Everyone in Millhaven knew that Quinlan Thorne could shoe a horse in the dark and forge a blade that would never break, but could not dance to save his life. A young woman named Sarah took pity on him and offered her hand. He accepted, and when the music started, he tried. He truly did. But his feet seemed to have no connection to the rhythm. His arms moved a beat behind everyone else's, and when he was supposed to spin Sarah, he nearly sent her careening into another couple. She laughed, breathless, and tried to guide him, but it was hopeless. By the time the song ended, Quinlan was flushed with embarrassment and Sarah was suppressing giggles. "You really are terrible at this," she said, not unkindly. "I did warn Marcus. One more. Maybe you just need practice." But before he could respond, another voice cut in. "I will take the next one." Quinlan turned. A woman he did not recognize stood there, dressed in a fine yellow gown, her blonde hair elaborately pinned. She had the look of money about her, the kind that came from owning land rather than working it. "Oh, I do not think," Sarah began. "I insist." The blonde woman smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "It looks like such fun." Quinlan felt the beginnings of annoyance. There was a mocking edge to her tone, and he was self-aware enough to know when he was being laughed at rather than laughed with. But before he could speak, someone else stepped forward. "Actually, he promised me the next dance." This woman was dark-haired, also well-dressed, though less ostentatiously. She looked at the blonde with a raised eyebrow. "Did you not, sir?" "No, I was here first," the blonde said, her smile tightening. "You most certainly were not." A small crowd was gathering now, sensing drama. Quinlan wanted nothing more than to retreat to his smithy and forget this entire evening. But then there was a commotion at the edge of the growing circle, someone pushing through, and suddenly a third figure stood in front of him. The orc girl from the band. Up close, she was smaller than he expected, maybe a hand shorter than himself, with a lean, strong build. Her green skin caught the torchlight, and her dark eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him forget the two human women entirely. "No," she said simply. "He dances with me." The blonde woman drew herself up. "Excuse me, who do you think?" The orc girl did not let her finish. She moved forward, and the blonde woman instinctively stepped back. But the dark-haired woman did not retreat. Instead, she planted her feet and said, "The band is supposed to be playing, not dancing with guests. The band is on a break between sets." The orc girl's voice was calm but firm. "And I claim this dance. You cannot just claim, watch me." What happened next would be talked about in Millhaven for months afterward. The dark-haired woman reached out to grab the orc girl's arm, perhaps to pull her back, but the orc girl was faster. She caught the woman's wrist, twisted, and suddenly the woman was off balance. Not falling, not hurt, but definitely surprised. The blonde tried to intervene, grabbing at the orc girl's shoulder, and that was when it became an actual scuffle. The orc girl did not throw punches. She did not need to. She was quick and strong, using her body to block and her hands to redirect. The blonde stumbled backward into the dark-haired woman, who yelped in surprise. Someone's elbow hit someone else's nose. There was a ripping sound as the dark-haired woman's sleeve tore free at the shoulder seam. And then it was over. The orc girl stood in front of Quinlan, barely breathing hard, while the two human women stared at her in shock. The crowd had gone silent. Even the other musicians on the platform had stopped tuning their instruments. Quinlan found his voice. "You did not have to do that." She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw uncertainty flicker across her face. "No, I suppose I did not, but I wanted to." "Why?" "Because." She glanced at the two women, then back at him. "Because they were mocking you and you were letting them. And because I have been watching you not dance for the last two songs, and I think perhaps you do not dance badly on purpose to be funny. You just genuinely do not know how, and that is." She paused, searching for the word. "Brave. To do it anyway." Quinlan had no idea what to say to that. No one had ever called him brave for making a fool of himself. The dark-haired woman had recovered her composure. She pressed a hand to her torn sleeve and said, in a voice that carried, "This is unacceptable." "Violence at the festival? It was hardly violence," someone in the crowd called out. A few people laughed, but the blonde woman was not laughing. Her face had gone pale, then red. "An orc," she said, spitting the word like a curse. "Attacking guests. This is exactly why they should not be allowed." The orc girl's voice was still calm, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "I am a member of the festival band. I was invited to play. By the musicians, perhaps, not by the festival council." The blonde drew herself up. "My family endows this festival. We have a say in who participates." "And I say, ladies." Marcus Fielding stepped into the circle, his voice carrying the weight of authority. He was not on the festival council, but he had lived in Millhaven longer than anyone except the priest. "I think we have had enough excitement for one evening. The band needs to resume playing, and the rest of us need to get back to dancing. Or, in some cases, attempting to dance." That got another laugh, releasing some of the tension, but the blonde woman was not finished. "This will be brought before the council," she said, looking directly at the orc girl. "You assaulted two guests." "I defended my right to ask someone to dance," the orc girl replied evenly. "If that is an assault, then perhaps your understanding of tradition needs examining." The two women retreated, the dark-haired one still holding her sleeve, the blonde radiating fury. The crowd began to disperse, conversations bubbling up, but Quinlan barely heard any of it. He was looking at the orc girl, who was looking back at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You still owe me a dance," she said. "I should warn you," Quinlan said. "I am genuinely terribly bad at this. I know, I was watching." She held out her hand. "I am Aelira Moss." He took her hand. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. "Quinlan Thorne. I know who you are." Everyone knows the blacksmith who dances like he is wrestling a bear. That is not reassuring. She smiled then, a real smile that showed her tusks and made her eyes crinkle at the corners. "Come on, let us give them something to talk about." The band had resumed playing, the drummer counting them in for a slower song. Quinlan and Aelira moved to the center of the dancing space, and he tried to remember what Sarah had told him about where to put his hands. Aelira corrected his grip gently, positioning his right hand at her waist and taking his left in hers. "Just follow the rhythm," she said. "Do not think about the steps, just feel the music. I am a blacksmith. I feel metal. Metal has rhythm too. The hammer, the bellows, it is not so different." She was wrong about that, but Quinlan tried anyway. He stepped when she stepped, turned when she turned, and only trampled her foot twice. She did not complain. Instead, she kept up a steady stream of quiet instruction, her voice barely audible over the music. There. No, the other way. Yes. Good. Now step back. Back. Turn well, you tried. Despite everything, Quinlan found himself almost enjoying it. Not the dancing itself, which remained a disaster, but the focus it required, the way it demanded his complete attention. And Aelira was a good teacher, patient and clear. When the song finally ended, he was sweating and she was breathless with laughter, but it was not cruel laughter. It was the kind that invited him to laugh too. "See," she said, "you survived. Barely." Same time next year, he surprised himself by saying, "Maybe sooner." She looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "Maybe," she agreed. Then she stepped back and gave a small bow. "Thank you for the dance, Quinlan Thorne. Thank you for fighting 2 women for the privilege. It was my pleasure." She turned to go back to the platform, then paused. "For what it is worth, I think you are brave in more ways than one. Not many men would keep dancing after that first song." She was gone before he could respond, climbing back onto the platform and picking up her fiddle. The band launched into a lively jig, and Aelira's fiddle sang above the other instruments, bright and joyful. Quinlan retreated to the ale barrel and found Marcus grinning at him like a fool. "Do not say a word," Quinlan warned. "Would not dream of it." Marcus handed him a fresh cup. "Though I will say that was the most interesting dance I have seen in 30 years of festivals. She is going to get in trouble. Those women, their family, the Westmores." "Yes." Marcus's grin faded. "They own half the farmland south of here, and they do endow the festival. Helen Westmore, the blonde, sits on the council herself. They have opinions about who belongs in Millhaven and who does not. Aelira is a member of the band. She is an orc member of the band. To some people that matters." Marcus took a long drink. "But the girl has spirit, I will give her that." Quinlan stayed for another hour, nursing his ale and watching Aelira play. She was good, better than good. Her fingers flew over the strings, and she seemed to feel the music in her whole body, swaying with the rhythm, her pointed ears twitching slightly in time with the beat. Between songs, she laughed with the other musicians, easy and comfortable, but Quinlan noticed that none of the villagers approached the platform to speak to her. He left before the festival ended, walking back to his smithy under a sky full of stars. The sounds of music and laughter faded behind him, and by the time he reached his door, there was only the familiar silence of his workshop and the banked coals of his forge glowing in the darkness. He did not expect to see Aelira again until next year's festival, if then. But the next morning she was sitting on the bench outside his smithy when he emerged to start his day's work. "I hope I am not intruding," she said, standing as he approached. In the daylight, she looked tired, shadows under her eyes. "I wanted to apologize." Quinlan stopped. "For what?" "For making a scene, for dragging you into, whatever that was. I was not thinking clearly." "You were thinking fine. Those women were mocking me and you called them on it. Still." She shifted her weight, uncomfortable. "I may have cost you friendships, and I definitely made enemies for myself. Helen Westmore sent word to the innkeeper this morning. I am no longer welcome to play with the festival band." Anger flared hot in Quinlan's chest, the same kind he felt when he saw a badly made tool or a horse mistreated. "She cannot do that." "She can, actually. Her family pays for half the festival. The innkeeper was very apologetic, but he cannot afford to cross the Westmores." Aelira looked out toward the road, her jaw tight. "It is fine. I will find other work. I just wanted to make sure you knew it was not your fault." "It is not your fault either." "You did nothing wrong," she laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I fought 2 human women for the right to dance with a man I had never spoken to. I think that qualifies as something. It qualifies as standing up for what you wanted. That takes courage." She looked at him then, really looked, and some of the tension left her shoulders. "You are a strange man, Quinlan Thorne, so I have been told." He pulled out his key and unlocked the smithy door. "Have you eaten?" "What? Breakfast. Have you eaten?" "No, I came straight here. Come inside. I have bread and cheese. We can talk." She followed him into the smithy, and he saw her take in the space with the same careful attention she gave her fiddle. The forge, the anvil, the racks of tools hanging in precise order. The small living area at the back where he slept and cooked. It was not much, but it was his. He cut bread and cheese and poured water from the pitcher. They sat on stools near the cold forge, and for a few minutes they ate in silence. Then Aelira said, "Why did you dance last night?" "If you knew you were bad at it, if you knew people would laugh." Quinlan considered the question. No one had ever asked him that before. "Because I refused to let not knowing something stop me from trying. I did not have anyone to teach me to dance when I was young. My parents died when I was 7, and after that, I was passed between families who fed me but never quite made me one of their own. I learned to work, to be useful, but not the other things, the social things. So you dance badly as an act of defiance." "I suppose I do." He had never thought of it that way, but it felt right. "Once a year at the Harvest Festival, to remind myself that I belong here too, even if I am not the same as everyone else." Aelira was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I understand that, being an outsider, trying to belong anyway." "Is that why you play?" "Part of it. Mostly I play because I love music. My mother taught me back in the Orc settlement where I grew up. But she died 3 years ago, and my father remarried a woman who did not want me there, so I left. I have been traveling ever since, taking work where I can find it, playing for anyone who will listen. The band here is lucky to have you, was lucky to have me." She smiled sadly. "Though I suppose I knew it was temporary, it always is. It does not have to be." "How do you mean?" Quinlan set down his bread. An idea was forming, reckless and probably foolish, but he had spent his whole life playing it safe, and look where that had gotten him. Alone, isolated, dancing badly once a year and calling it defiance. "Teach me," he said. Aelira blinked. "Teach you what?" "To dance, properly. You said I was brave for trying, but I think you were just being kind. The truth is I have been trying the same way for years and never getting better. If someone actually taught me, maybe I could." He trailed off, feeling suddenly foolish. "Never mind, it is a stupid idea." "It is not stupid." Aelira leaned forward, her eyes bright. "But why? What would you get out of it? A skill I lack, and maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe a friend. You said you have been traveling, taking work where you can find it, but Millhaven could be more than temporary if you wanted it to be. The Westmores can go to hell." The words surprised him with their vehemence. "Forgive my language, but they do not own this village, no matter how much money they have. You earned your place in that band. If they take it from you, that is their loss and their shame." Aelira studied him, and he had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing straight through to his bones. "You are serious." "I am always serious. It is one of my flaws." "I do not think it is a flaw." She stood and held out her hand. "All right, I will teach you to dance, Quinlan Thorne. On one condition." He stood and took her hand. "What condition?" "That you tell me when I am being foolish. Because agreeing to this, staying in a place where half the people want me gone, teaching a man to dance who might never learn, that seems like it might qualify. You are not being foolish. You are being brave. There is a difference." She laughed, and this time it was genuine, full of warmth. "Then we are agreed. When do we start?" They started that evening. Quinlan finished his work early, delivering a set of hinges to a farmer on the east side of town, and returned to find Aelira waiting outside his smithy with her fiddle case. She had changed into a simpler dress, pale green and practical, and her dark hair was tied back. "I thought we could practice in your workshop," she said. "If that is all right, more private than the village square." Quinlan unlocked the door and lit lamps, pushing his work table to one side to clear a space. The floor was dirt, packed hard from years of use, not ideal for dancing but serviceable. Aelira set down her fiddle case and stood in the center of the cleared area. "Come here," she said. "Let me see your basic stance." He stood in front of her, feeling awkward and oversized. She circled him slowly, and he resisted the urge to fidget. "You stand like you are bracing for impact," she observed. "Shoulders up, weight back. That might be good in a fight, but it is terrible for dancing. You need to be balanced, ready to move in any direction." She demonstrated, her posture open and light. "Try it," he tried. She corrected him, her hands adjusting his shoulders, his arms, the angle of his feet. Her touch was professional, impersonal, but he was intensely aware of it nonetheless. "Better," she said. "Now, before we add music, let me teach you the basic steps of the reel. It is 6 counts. Step, step, step together, step, then turn. Watch me." She demonstrated, counting aloud, her movements precise and clean. It looked simple. It was not. Quinlan tried to follow, and immediately his feet tangled. He stumbled, caught himself, tried again. Aelira watched without judgment, then moved beside him. "Together," she said. "Count with me. 1, 2, 3, and 4. They practiced the basic step for nearly an hour. No music, just the sound of their feet on the packed earth and Aelira's voice counting. Slowly, painfully, something began to click. The rhythm started to make sense, not in his head but in his body, the way the rhythm of the hammer did. "There," Aelira said, and he heard the smile in her voice. "You have got it. Keep going." He did 6 repetitions in a row without stumbling, and when he finally stopped, he was grinning like an idiot. "I did it." "You did. Do not let it go to your head. We have barely started." But she was grinning too, ready to try it with a turn. They worked until full dark, until Quinlan's legs ached and his shirt was damp with sweat. When Aelira finally called a halt, he felt like he had put in a full day at the forge. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, packing up her fiddle. "I will be here." She paused at the door. "Thank you, Quinlan. I am the one learning. I should be thanking you. No, I mean thank you for this, for giving me a reason to stay. I was going to leave Millhaven tomorrow. Find another town, another temporary job. But I think I would like to see this through, see if we can make you into a dancer." "That seems optimistic, maybe, but I have always been an optimistic person. It is one of my flaws." She left before he could respond, her footsteps fading into the night. Quinlan stood in his smithy, surrounded by the familiar tools of his trade, and felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Hope, perhaps, or just the pleasant ache of well-used muscles. He slept better that night than he had in months. The lessons became routine over the following weeks. Quinlan worked during the day, forging and shaping metal, and Aelira played at the inn, performing for the handful of travelers who passed through. In the evenings, she came to his smithy, and they danced in the space he cleared for her. She taught him the reel first, then the simple waltz, then a more complex circle dance that required him to remember patterns. He was a slow learner, but he was determined, and Aelira was patient. More than patient. She seemed to genuinely enjoy the challenge of teaching him, breaking down each movement into smaller pieces until he could manage it. "You think too much," she told him one evening, after he had stumbled through the same sequence 3 times. "You are trying to remember the steps instead of feeling the music." "I do not know how to feel music." "Of course you do. You just do not know you know." She picked up her fiddle and played a simple melody, slow and sweet. "What does this make you think of?" Quinlan listened. "Rain." "Early morning rain on the roof." "Good, and this?" She changed the tune, something faster, brighter, children playing, or maybe birds at dawn. Exactly. Music tells stories, creates feelings. When you dance, you are part of that story. You do not have to think about where your feet go. You just have to listen and let the music move you. She set down the fiddle and held out her hands. One more time, but this time close your eyes. I will definitely step on your feet. So be it. Close your eyes. He did. She started humming, a tune he recognized from the festival, and he felt her hands take his, guiding him into position. When she started to move, he tried to let go of thinking, to just follow the sound of her voice and the pressure of her hands. He stumbled twice but did not fall, and when the song ended, he opened his eyes to find her smiling at him. "Better," she said. "Much better." They were standing close, closer than the dance required, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Quinlan stepped back, suddenly aware of how warm the smithy had become. "I should bank the forge," he said, though the forge had been cold all evening. "Of course." Aelira moved away, picking up her fiddle case. "Same time tomorrow." "Yes, thank you, Aelira." She paused at the door, looking back at him. In the lamplight, her green skin seemed to glow and her dark eyes were soft. "You are welcome, Quinlan." After she left, Quinlan sat on his stool and put his head in his hands. He was in trouble. Somewhere in the last few weeks, dancing lessons had become the best part of his day, and it was not because of the dancing. It was because of her. The way she laughed when he made a mistake, the way she explained things with such care, the way she looked at him like he was worth her time and attention. He had never felt this way about anyone before, had never had the time or opportunity. And now that he did, it was complicated by the fact that she was an orc, he was human, and half the village already disapproved. But when he thought about stopping the lessons, about letting her leave Millhaven, his chest tightened with something that felt like panic. So he did not stop. He kept showing up, kept learning, kept looking forward to those evening hours more than he wanted to admit. The trouble came on a cold evening in late October. Quinlan was closing up his smithy for the day when Marcus appeared, his face grim. "We need to talk," the older man said. Quinlan invited him inside, lit a lamp, and waited. "There is going to be a council meeting tomorrow night," Marcus said, "about the festival, specifically about the band. They already banned Aelira from playing. They did. But Helen Westmore is not satisfied with that. She is pushing for a formal rule, no orcs in any official festival capacity. Musicians, vendors, nothing, and she has support. 3 of the 5 council members are inclined to agree with her." Quinlan felt anger building, hot and fierce. On what grounds? Tradition. Maintaining the character of the festival. The usual nonsense. Marcus sighed. "The truth is, most people do not care one way or another, but the Westmores have money and influence and the council does not want to cross them. So they will ban orcs to keep the Westmores happy. Unless someone speaks against it. The meeting is open to all villagers. If enough people show up in opposition, the council might reconsider." Quinlan knew what Marcus was really saying. "You want me to speak? You have standing in this community. People respect you. If you stood up and said this rule was wrong, it would carry weight. And if I do, I will make an enemy of the Westmores. They will make my life difficult. Probably." Marcus met his eyes. "I would not ask if I did not think it mattered. That girl has done nothing wrong except exist while being an orc. And I know you two have been spending time together. People talk. We are friends. She is teaching me to dance. I know, and I think that is good. You need friends, Quinlan. You need more than just work." Marcus stood. "The meeting is tomorrow at sunset in the council hall. I hope to see you there." After Marcus left, Quinlan sat in the growing darkness, thinking. He had spent his whole life avoiding conflict, keeping his head down, earning his place through hard work and silence. Speaking at a council meeting would make waves, would draw attention he did not want. But the alternative was letting Aelira be pushed out of yet another place that should have welcomed her. And that felt like a worse kind of cowardice than bad dancing. When Aelira arrived for their lesson that evening, he told her about the meeting. She listened without interruption, her face carefully neutral. When he finished, she said, "You should not get involved. Too late. I am already involved. Quinlan, these people can make your life very difficult. You depend on the village for your livelihood. If the Westmores turn people against you, then I will deal with it. But I am not going to stay silent while they make rules designed to exclude you." "Why?" Her voice was sharp, almost angry. "Why do you care so much?" "We have known each other for a few weeks. I am just an orc passing through your town, teaching you to dance. It is not worth risking your reputation over." Quinlan stood and faced her. "You are not just anything. You are my friend. And you are right. We have only known each other a few weeks. But in those weeks, you have shown me more kindness than most people in this village have in 23 years. So yes, I am going to speak at that meeting. And if you want me to stop, you will have to give me a better reason than it is not worth it." Aelira stared at him, her dark eyes shining. Then, to his alarm, tears spilled down her green cheeks. "I am sorry," he said immediately. "I did not mean to upset you. I am not upset." She wiped at her eyes impatiently. "I am grateful, and I am scared. I have been pushed out of so many places, Quinlan. I do not want to watch it happen again. But I especially do not want to see you hurt because of me." He stepped closer, close enough to see the individual tears caught on her lashes. "Then come with me tomorrow. Stand with me. We will face it together." She took a shaky breath. "All right, together." They did not dance that night. Instead, they sat by the cold forge and talked, really talked, about their lives and their fears, and the strange, fragile thing that was growing between them. And when Aelira finally left, Quinlan walked her back to the inn despite her protests, because the night was cold and the road was dark, and he did not want her to be alone. The council hall was packed when Quinlan and Aelira arrived the next evening. Every bench was full, and people lined the walls. Apparently, word had spread, and half the village had turned out to see what would happen. Quinlan saw Marcus near the front, who gave him an encouraging nod. He also saw Helen Westmore and her sister Iris, the dark-haired woman from the festival, sitting in the front row with identical expressions of cool disdain. The council filed in and took their seats at the long table on the raised platform. 5 men and women, all of them farmers or landowners, all of them older than Quinlan. The chairwoman, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Trent, called the meeting to order. "We are here to discuss a proposal regarding the Harvest Festival," she said. "Helen Westmore has raised concerns about the inclusion of non-human participants in official festival roles. Helen, would you like to speak to your proposal?" Helen stood, her blonde hair gleaming in the lamplight. "Thank you, Margaret. I will be brief. The Harvest Festival is a tradition that goes back generations in Millhaven. It is a celebration of our community, our shared values, our way of life. In recent years, we have seen an erosion of that tradition, with outsiders taking roles that should be reserved for members of our community. I am proposing a simple rule. Official festival participants, musicians, organizers, vendors must be residents of Millhaven for at least 1 year, and must be human. This is not about prejudice. It is about preserving what makes our festival special." There were murmurs of agreement from parts of the crowd. Quinlan felt Aelira tense beside him. Margaret looked around the room. "Does anyone wish to speak in favor of this proposal?" A farmer Quinlan recognized stood up. "I think Helen has a point. The festival is for our people. We should not have to share it with strangers." Another voice. "My grandfather helped start this festival. He would be horrified to see orcs playing the music. Margaret nodded. And does anyone wish to speak against the proposal? Quinlan stood before he could second-guess himself. Every head in the room turned toward him. I do, he said. Helen's eyes narrowed. The blacksmith, of course. Margaret ignored her. State your name and your objection. Quinlan Thorne. I have lived in Millhaven all my life. And I object to this proposal because it is based on fear and small-mindedness dressed up as tradition. He felt Aelira's hand grip his arm, but he kept going. Aelira Moss is a better musician than anyone else in the festival band. That is not opinion, that is fact. She has done nothing but contribute to this community since she arrived. The only reason you want to exclude her is because she is an orc, and that is not tradition, that is prejudice. The boy does not know what he is talking about, someone muttered, but Marcus stood up. I do. And I agree with Quinlan. I have been coming to this festival for 30 years, and the music has never been better than it was this year, with Aelira playing. If we start making rules about who can and cannot participate based on their race, we are not preserving tradition. We are making a new tradition and an ugly one. A woman near the back stood. I agree. My children loved the music this year. It would be a shame to lose that. Aelira was always polite when she came to buy bread from my shop, another voice called. Helen's face was reddening. This is not about one orc. This is about maintaining standards. Quinlan cut her off, and his voice rang through the hall. You want to talk about standards? Let us talk about what happened at the festival. Your sister and you tried to mock me for dancing badly. Aelira stood up for me. And instead of being ashamed of your behavior, you are using your family's money to punish her for it. That is not upholding standards. That is abusing power. The room erupted. People shouting, some in agreement, some in outrage. Margaret banged her gavel, calling for order. When the noise finally died down, she said, Does anyone else wish to speak? To Quinlan's surprise, Iris Westmore stood up. Her torn sleeve had been mended, but she fingered the seam as she spoke. I do. I want to say that my sister and I were wrong at the festival. We were cruel, and the orc girl Aelira had every right to be angry, but that does not change the fact that she became physical. There was violence. There was a scuffle, Aelira said, and everyone turned to look at her. She had not stood, but her voice carried clearly. One I regret. But I was defending myself and someone who could not defend himself against mockery. If that makes me unfit for your festival, then perhaps your festival is not worth playing for. How dare you, Helen began, but Margaret cut her off. Enough. The council will now deliberate and vote. She looked at her fellow council members. All in favor of the proposal to restrict festival participation to human residents of 1 year or more. 2 hands went up. Helen's face lit with triumph, then fell as she realized it was not enough. All opposed, 3 hands, including Margaret's. The proposal fails. Margaret banged her gavel. The festival will remain open to all participants, regardless of race, provided they are invited by the organizing committee. This meeting is adjourned. The room erupted again, this time with a mixture of cheers and angry muttering. Quinlan felt light-headed with relief. Beside him, Aelira was shaking, her eyes wide. We won, she whispered. We did. Helen Westmore pushed through the crowd toward them, her face tight with fury. This is not over, she hissed at Quinlan. You have made a very powerful enemy today. I already had one, Quinlan replied evenly. At least now I know for certain. She swept past, her sister trailing behind her. Around them, people were coming up to congratulate them, to shake Quinlan's hand, to welcome Aelira. Marcus was grinning like a fool. But in the midst of the celebration, Quinlan saw Aelira's face, saw the tears running down her cheeks again, and he understood. This was not just a victory for her. This was the first time in a long time that people had chosen to include her rather than push her away. He took her hand and she gripped it tightly, and they stood together in the crowded council hall while the village buzzed around them. Later that night, after the crowd had dispersed and they had walked back to his smithy in the cold, Aelira said, "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to. I told you we are friends." "Is that all we are?" Quinlan stopped walking. They were standing in the yard outside his smithy, the stars bright overhead, their breath misting in the chill air. "What do you mean?" Aelira turned to face him. "I mean that I think about you all the time. I mean that teaching you to dance has become the best part of my day, and it has nothing to do with the dancing. I mean that when you stood up in that meeting and defended me, I felt something I have not felt in a very long time. Safe, valued, seen." She took a breath. "I am falling in love with you, Quinlan Thorne, and I need to know if that is something you can possibly want, because if not, I should leave now before it gets any harder." Quinlan's heart was pounding. "You are not leaving." Then he kissed her, or she kissed him. Later, neither of them would be quite sure who moved first. But suddenly they were pressed together, her hands fisted in his shirt, his arms around her waist, and her lips were warm and her tusks pressed gently against his skin, and everything else in the world fell away. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Quinlan said, "I am falling in love with you too. I think I have been since the moment you fought 2 women for the right to dance with me." Aelira laughed, bright and joyful. "Then we are both fools, probably, but I find I do not care." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. When they finally went inside out of the cold, they sat by the forge and talked until dawn about everything and nothing, about the future and the past, and the strange miracle of finding each other. The weeks that followed were the happiest Quinlan had ever known. He and Aelira were careful about public displays of affection. Millhaven had accepted her right to play in the festival, but a romance between a human and an orc would still raise eyebrows, but in private, they were inseparable. She continued to teach him to dance, though the lessons often dissolved into laughter and kissing. He taught her the basics of blacksmithing, and she proved to have a good eye for metalwork. "You could apprentice," he told her one evening, watching her shape a piece of copper wire into an intricate knot. "You have the hands for it." "I think I will stick to music," she said, "but I like being here watching you work. You have the same focus with metal that I have with my fiddle." "It is attractive," he grinned. "Is it?" "Very." She set down the wire and crossed the smithy to where he stood by the forge. "In fact, I think you should stop working and pay attention to me instead." He was happy to oblige, but as autumn deepened into winter, Quinlan began to notice changes. Small things at first. A few of his regular customers started taking their business to the blacksmith in the next town over. The innkeeper, who usually hired him to repair the kitchen equipment, brought in someone else. People were polite when he saw them on the street, but there was a coolness that had not been there before. Marcus confirmed his suspicions. "The Westmores are spreading word that you are not to be trusted, that you care more about an orc than your own people. Some folks are listening." "How many?" "Not most, but enough to hurt your business." Marcus looked troubled. "I am sorry, Quinlan. I hoped it would blow over, but Helen is relentless. She has convinced her friends and tenants to avoid you, and they have convinced others." Quinlan felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders, but he tried not to let Aelira see his worry. Business would pick up again eventually. It had to, but by December he was struggling. The harvest season, usually his busiest time, had been lean. He had enough saved to get through the winter, but not much beyond that, and he could see the guilt in Aelira's eyes every time a customer failed to show up. "This is my fault," she said one evening, her voice small. "It is the Westmore's fault," Quinlan corrected. "Not yours." But if you had not defended me, then I would not be able to look at myself in the mirror. Aelira, listen to me." He took her hands, made her meet his eyes. "I do not regret any of this. Not speaking at the meeting, not falling in love with you, not any of it. Business will pick up. It always does." She did not look convinced, but she nodded. "All right, but I am going to help." "How? I have an idea. Trust me." 2 days later, Aelira gathered the other members of the festival band, the drummer, the flutist, the harpist, and the other fiddler in Quinlan's smithy. He watched from the doorway as she explained her plan. "The winter solstice is in 2 weeks, she said. "Millhaven does not usually have a celebration, but other villages do. I am proposing we organize one here. Music, dancing, food. A community gathering." The harpist, a middle-aged woman named Clara, looked skeptical. "That is a lot of work for not much return. The festival endowment does not cover winter events." "We would not use the endowment, we would organize it ourselves. Charge a small entrance fee. Use the money to support local crafters and musicians. And more importantly, to remind people what community actually means." The drummer, a young man named Peter, grinned. "You want to throw a party that shows up the Westmores." "I want to throw a party that includes everyone, even the Westmores if they choose to come." They debated for an hour, but in the end, everyone agreed. The solstice celebration would happen, with or without the council's blessing. Aelira threw herself into the planning with the same focus she brought to music. She recruited volunteers, organized food donations, and convinced the innkeeper to host the event in his largest room. Quinlan helped where he could, forging brackets for torches and repairing the inn's chairs. And slowly, as word spread, something started to shift in the village. People who had been avoiding Quinlan started to reconsider. A farmer brought his horse to be shod, mentioning casually that he was looking forward to the solstice celebration. A woman commissioned a set of iron hooks for her kitchen, then asked if Quinlan and Aelira would be dancing at the event. "We might," Quinlan said cautiously. "Good, I would like to see that. You two seem happy together." It was not much, but it was something. A crack in the wall the Westmores had tried to build. The night of the solstice celebration arrived cold and clear, the sky full of stars. The inn's main room had been transformed with garlands and candles, and the smell of mulled cider filled the air. Quinlan arrived early to help set up and found Aelira already there, tuning her fiddle on the small platform they had built. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if no one comes? They will come." And they did. By the time the music started, the room was packed. Farmers and crafters, families with children, even a few of the wealthier landowners. Marcus was there, grinning and clapping along. The council chairwoman, Margaret, had brought her husband. The only notable absences were the Westmores. Aelira and the band played, and the music was beautiful, a mix of traditional tunes and newer songs Aelira had written. People danced, laughed, shared food and stories. And in the middle of it all, Quinlan realized something. This was what community was supposed to feel like. Not walls and exclusion, but people coming together despite their differences. When the band took a break, Aelira stepped down from the platform and found Quinlan at the edge of the crowd. "Dance with me," she said. "Now, in front of everyone. Why not? You have been practicing." It was true. After months of lessons, he was no longer terrible. He was merely mediocre, which felt like a significant improvement. He let her lead him onto the floor, and when the band started up again, Peter had taken over the drum, and the others were playing without Aelira. They danced. Quinlan was intensely aware of the eyes on them, the whispers and murmurs. But he focused on Aelira, on the feel of her hand in his, the warmth of her smile. He managed the steps, only stumbling once, and when the song ended, there was a smattering of applause. "See," Aelira said, Not so bad. Before he could respond, there was a commotion at the door. Helen and Iris Westmore had arrived, both dressed in expensive furs, both looking around the room with expressions of disdain. The music faltered. Conversation died. Everyone turned to watch. Helen's gaze found Aelira and Quinlan on the dance floor. So this is where everyone has gone. I wondered why the village was so empty this evening. Margaret Trent stepped forward. Helen, Iris, you are welcome to join us. There is food and drink and the music is excellent. I am sure it is. Helen's tone made it clear she thought the opposite. But we are not here to celebrate. We are here to remind you all of something important. And what is that? Marcus asked, his voice steady. That actions have consequences. This man, she pointed at Quinlan, has chosen to align himself with an orc over his own people. And you are all here supporting him, celebrating with him. Do you not see what you are condoning? Love, Aelira said quietly. Every head turned toward her. Is that what we are condoning? Because I love him and he loves me, and I do not see how that harms anyone. Helen's face went pale, then red. You admit it in front of everyone. I do. Aelira's voice was steady, though Quinlan could feel her hand trembling in his. I love Quinlan Thorne. And I think that is something worth celebrating. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Clara, the harpist, started to clap, slowly at first, then faster. Peter joined in, then Marcus, then Margaret, and then the whole room was applauding, not politely but genuinely, warmly. Helen looked around, her expression shocked. You are all fools, she said. Every one of you, maybe, Marcus said, but we are happy fools. You should try it sometime. The Westmore sisters left in a fury, slamming the door behind them. And then the party resumed, louder and more joyful than before. Aelira was hugged by at least a dozen people, and Quinlan shook so many hands his arm ached. Late in the evening, when the crowd had thinned and the band was playing soft, slow songs, Quinlan and Aelira slipped outside for some air. The night was cold, their breath misting, but it felt good after the warmth of the crowded room. That was brave, Quinlan said, telling everyone. I was tired of hiding, and I thought if we are going to do this, we should do it properly. No more secrets. No more secrets, he agreed. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her against the cold. I love you, Aelira Moss. I love you too, Quinlan Thorne. She tipped her head back to look at the stars. Do you think things will be easier now or harder? I do not know, maybe both, but we will face it together. Together, she echoed, then she smiled. You know, you danced pretty well tonight. I had a good teacher. The best. She kissed him, and for a while they stood in the cold and the starlight, just holding each other. Winter passed into spring, and then spring into summer. The Westmores remained hostile, but their influence waned as more people in the village chose to support Quinlan and Aelira. Quinlan's business picked up again, steady if not booming. Aelira continued to play at the inn and began teaching music to a few of the village children. They talked sometimes about the future, about building a life together, about what that might look like. Quinlan had never imagined getting married, never thought anyone would want him that way. But with Aelira, he started to imagine it. A home, a family, a future. In late summer, he began working on a project in secret. It took him 3 weeks, working in the early mornings before Aelira arrived and late at night after she left. When it was finished, he held it up to the light and examined it critically. Not his best work, but not his worst either. It would do. The autumn harvest festival arrived again, a full year after the night Aelira had fought for the right to dance with him. The village square was decorated the same way, the musicians' platform set up in the same spot, but everything felt different now. Lighter, more hopeful. Aelira was part of the official band again. her place secured after the council had quietly reversed the informal ban the Westmores had tried to enforce. She wore a new dress, deep green to match her skin, and her fiddle gleamed in the torchlight. The festival opened with speeches from the council, thanking everyone for another successful harvest. Then the music started and people flooded onto the dance floor. Quinlan waded through the first dance, watching. Then when the band struck up a reel, he made his way to the platform and held out his hand to Aelira. She stared at him. "What are you doing, asking you to dance? Unless you are too busy," the other musicians grinned. Clara said, "We can manage one song without her. Go on, Aelira." She set down her fiddle and took Quinlan's hand, and they walked out onto the floor together. The crowd parted to make room, and Quinlan was aware of every eye on them. But he did not care. He had practiced for this. The music started and he danced. Not perfectly, he still missed a step, still turned the wrong way once, but competently. He could see the surprise and delight on Aelira's face, and it made every hour of secret practice worth it. When the song ended, he did not let go of her hand. Instead, he dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the dance floor. Aelira's eyes went wide. "Quinlan, what are you?" He pulled the ring from his pocket. He had forged it himself, a simple band of silver with a small green stone set in the center. "Aelira Moss, you have made my life better in every possible way. You have taught me to dance, to laugh, to hope. You have shown me what it means to be brave. Will you marry me?" For a moment, she just stared at him, her mouth open. Then she started to cry, tears running down her green cheeks. "Yes," she said, her voice choked. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then she was pulling him to his feet and kissing him in front of the entire village. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and the band launched into a joyful tune. They danced again, and this time, Quinlan did not miss a single step. The wedding took place 2 months later, on a crisp October afternoon. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and family, held in the village square where they had first danced. Marcus stood as Quinlan's witness and Clara as Aelira's. The village priest, an old man who had known Quinlan since he was a child, performed the ceremony with warmth and humor. "Do you, Quinlan Thorne, take this woman to be your wife?" he asked. "I do." "And do you, Aelira Moss, take this man to be your husband?" "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Quinlan did thoroughly, to the sound of cheers and laughter. When they broke apart, Aelira was grinning. "Hello, husband," she said. "Hello, wife." The celebration that followed was loud and joyful, with music and dancing and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. Even a few people who had initially been skeptical of the match came to offer their congratulations. The Westmores, unsurprisingly, were absent. As the sun set and the torches were lit, Quinlan and Aelira danced together in the square, surrounded by their friends. He was no longer a terrible dancer. He was merely mediocre, which felt like a triumph. But more importantly, he was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. "What are you thinking?" Aelira asked, her head resting on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. "That I am the luckiest man in Millhaven. Only Millhaven, not the whole world. Well, I do not want to get carried away." She laughed and kissed him. "I love you, Quinlan Thorne." "I love you too, Aelira Thorne." They stayed in the square until the stars came out, dancing and laughing and celebrating the life they were building together. And when they finally went home to the smithy that was now theirs, Quinlan had added a room for Aelira's music. With good light and space for her students, they knew they had found what so many people search for and never find: a place to belong, a person to love, a future worth building. The years that followed were not always easy. There were hard winters and lean harvests, customers who still refused to work with Quinlan because of his orc wife, moments of doubt and fear. But there were far more moments of joy. Aelira's music students multiplied, and she began to teach dance classes as well, passing on the knowledge she had given to Quinlan. The smithy thrived as Quinlan's reputation for quality work spread to neighboring villages. And they built a life together, one day at a time, one small choice at a time. 3 years after their wedding, Aelira gave birth to a daughter. They named her Nora, and she had her mother's green skin and her father's serious eyes. Quinlan held her in his large, calloused hands and felt something in his chest expand so powerfully he thought he might burst. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." Nora was followed 2 years later by another daughter whom they named Faye. Faye had her father's dark hair and her mother's infectious laugh. The 2 girls were inseparable, running wild through the smithy and the village, beloved by everyone who met them. Quinlan taught them to work metal as soon as they were old enough to hold a hammer safely. Aelira taught them music and dance. And together, he and Aelira taught them to be kind, to be brave, to stand up for what was right even when it was hard. On Nora's 5th birthday, Quinlan and Aelira took both girls to the harvest festival. It was the same festival where he had first met Aelira, now a decade past, though it felt like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. The village had grown, new families arriving, new traditions forming. But the core of it remained the same: music, dancing, community. The band was playing on the platform, and Aelira had been invited to join them for a few songs. Quinlan stood with Nora and Faye, watching as their mother climbed onto the stage and picked up her fiddle. She looked out over the crowd, caught his eye, and smiled. Then she began to play. The music was beautiful, a melody she had written years ago, full of joy and hope and love. Quinlan felt Nora tug on his hand. "Papa, can we dance?" He looked down at his daughters, both of them looking up at him with eager eyes. "I suppose we can, but I should warn you, I am not very good at it." "That is okay," Faye said. "Mama says you dance with your heart, and that is what matters." Quinlan felt his throat tighten. "Your mama is very wise. All right then. Let us dance." He took their hands and led them onto the floor, and they danced together in the torchlight. Quinlan's steps were still imperfect, still a beat behind the music sometimes, but it did not matter. His daughters laughed and spun, and did not care that their father was not the most graceful dancer in Millhaven. When the song ended, Aelira set down her fiddle and came down from the platform to join them. She scooped up Faye and spun her around, then took Nora's hand in Quinlan's, and they stood together in the center of the festival, a family. "Happy?" Aelira asked Quinlan, her dark eyes soft. He looked at his wife, his daughters, the village that had become truly his home. "Yes," he said, "I am." The next song started and they danced again, all 4 of them together. And if Quinlan's dancing was still a little clumsy, a little off-beat, no one seemed to mind. Because this was Millhaven, and they had learned that the best things in life were not the things done perfectly. They were the things done with love. Years continued to pass in that way, marked by harvests and festivals, by the growth of children and the deepening of love. Nora grew into a skilled musician like her mother, while Faye showed an aptitude for metalwork that made Quinlan's heart swell with pride. The smithy expanded, and Aelira's music school became a fixture in the village, drawing students from surrounding towns. The Westmores eventually moved away, selling their land to a young couple who proved far more interested in community than exclusion. Helen's parting words to Quinlan were sharp, but he barely heard them. He had stopped caring about her approval years ago. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Quinlan and Aelira stood in the same spot where they had first danced, where he had proposed, where they had been married. The festival was in full swing around them, but they had stolen a moment alone, standing at the edge of the torchlight. "Do you remember that first dance?" Aelira asked, leaning against him. "How could I forget? You fought 2 women for the privilege of dancing with the worst dancer in Millhaven." "The bravest dancer," she corrected, "and the kindest man, and the best husband I could have asked for." Quinlan kissed her forehead. "I was thinking about that night recently, about how different my life would be if you had not fought for that dance, if you had just walked away. I could never have walked away, not from you." She looked up at him, her green face illuminated by the flickering torches. "You gave me a home, Quinlan, a real home for the first time in my life. You fought for me when no one else would. You loved me when it would have been easier not to. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." "You do not need to be grateful. You have given me just as much, more even." He took her hand, the one that wore his silver ring, now worn smooth by years of wear. "You taught me that I was worth loving, that I belonged. That is everything." Aelira smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "We should dance. We should, though I am still not very good at it. You are good enough. You always have been." They walked back into the festival square, and the band saw them coming. Clara, who was still playing after all these years, grinned and launched into a familiar reel. Other couples joined them on the floor, including Nora and a young man from the village who had been courting her for months. Faye danced with her grandfather Marcus, who was slower now but still spry enough to keep up. Quinlan and Aelira danced in the center of it all, their movements practiced and easy after a decade of partnership. He still missed steps occasionally, still turned the wrong way sometimes, but Aelira guided him with the same patience she had shown that very first night. When the song ended, the crowd applauded and someone called out, "Give us another one." The band obliged, playing song after song as the night wore on, and Quinlan danced every single one with his wife, his partner, his love. The woman who had fought for him when he had not known he needed fighting for. The woman who had taught him that bravery came in many forms, and that the best kind was the kind that chose love over fear. As the festival wound down and the torches burned low, Quinlan and Aelira walked home through the quiet streets of Millhaven, hand in hand. Their daughters had gone ahead with Marcus, who would put them to bed in the small house he had built next to the smithy. The night was clear and cool, full of stars. "Thank you," Quinlan said quietly. "For what? For fighting for that dance, for staying, for loving me, for all of it." Aelira squeezed his hand. "Thank you for being worth fighting for making Millhaven a place I wanted to stay. For building this life with me." They reached the smithy and stood in the yard for a moment, looking up at the stars. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the last strains of music from the festival, the sound of people celebrating and laughing and living. "You ever think about that night?" Aelira asked. "About what would have happened if things had gone differently, sometimes. But then I stop because I cannot imagine a life without you in it. Good." She turned to face him, rising up on her toes to kiss him, "Because I cannot imagine one without you either." They went inside together, into the home they had built, the life they had created. And if anyone had asked Quinlan Thorne whether he regretted dancing badly at that festival so many years ago, whether he regretted the mockery and the struggle and the fight that had followed, he would have laughed. Because that terrible dance had led him to Aelira, and Aelira had led him to everything else: love, family, purpose, belonging. She had fought 2 women for the right to dance with him, and in doing so had changed both their lives forever. It was, without question, the best dance he had ever had. And every dance since had been better still. In the quiet of the smithy, with his wife beside him and his daughters asleep in the next room, Quinlan felt a peace he had never known in his solitary youth. He had built a good life with his hands, yes, but he had built a beautiful life with his heart. And it had all started with one badly danced reel, one brave orc woman, and one moment of connection that had changed everything. The story of the man who danced badly and the orc girl who fought for him became a legend in Millhaven, told and retold at festivals and gatherings for generations. But for Quinlan and Aelira, it was not a story. It was simply the beginning of their lives together. A beginning that had led to a middle full of joy and struggle and growth, and would lead, eventually, to an end decades in the future when they were both old and gray and still dancing together, still choosing each other, still grateful for that one perfect, terrible dance that had brought them together. But that end was far away yet. For now there was only this: a quiet night, a warm home, a family sleeping peacefully, and two people who had fought for each other and won. It was enough. It was everything. And as Quinlan drifted off to sleep that night, Aelira's head on his shoulder and her hand in his, he smiled. Because he knew, with absolute certainty, that he was exactly where he was meant to be, home.